If you've ever dreamed of owning your own business, but starting from scratch seems overwhelming and unnecessarily risky for where you are in life, then this video is your shortcut to entrepreneurship and business ownership. With as few as 5% of businesses ever reaching $1 million in revenue and over 50% of businesses failing in the first 5 years, starting a business from scratch may not meet your risk profile or your skill set. So what if instead you could completely skip the startup struggle and instead buy a business that already has cash flow on day one of you operating? I'm James Masotti. I am the owner of Our Team Accounting, a business that I acquired in April of 2023, as well as Crystal Clear Property Management, a company I started from scratch in 2019. On this channel, I'm passionate about helping business owners achieve their personal and professional goals through intentional financial planning. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's video. The very first step to getting started with this journey of buying a business, it starts with soul searching. It's all about knowing yourself and what your end goal is in the long run of things. There are some people that, they're trying to buy a lifestyle business, right? They're not wanting to be an active operator. They maybe already have an existing job that they want to keep, and they're looking to buy something that they can operate more passively. Do you actually want to manage people? Do you want to interact with customers? Do you want to have business clients or consumer clients? Do you want to have a retail environment where people come in? Do you want to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? All of these things are going to be critical to understand the types of industries and the types of businesses that are going to be a good fit for you to acquire. And so as you're thinking about, your skill set, your background, your knowledge, what kind of a life that you want to have, at the end of the day, your business should be something that fits around the life that you are trying to curate. If you don't do that and you end up buying the wrong business, you are ultimately going to be setting yourself up for burnout. You need to do this soul searching to try to set yourself up for the most success possible when you go into your acquisition. The next piece to being able to understand things is getting your financial picture in check. The lower end of the small business spectrum, which is where most people watching this video are probably going to be looking to buy, you're probably buying a business that's doing less than $10 million in revenue. And the reason that that's probably where you're going to be looking is because you're going to be using the Small Business Administration, the SBA's 7A acquisition product. This is the most common, most frequently used business acquisition loan in the United States. And with this loan, you are able to bring 10% as the down payment. And there's a lot of ways that you can potentially bring this 10%. You could bring it as cash. You can use your retirement accounts through something that's called a rollover for business startups, or ROBS for short. You could raise equity from investors or friends and family who are going to contribute that equity portion of the business. There's a lot of different ways that you potentially can bring just 10% to the table to do an acquisition. The next piece to that, though, is going to be building out your personal financial statement, your net worth. This is a required piece of information for the SBA 7A product. They have their own forms, but to be honest, this is something I've personally built out and tracked for myself because it's an important thing. If you're getting in the stage of your life where you're trying to build your net worth, you're trying to build equity for yourself through business acquisitions, real estate acquisitions, and you're getting to that stage in life, this is a great thing to be able to track for yourself anyway. And so knowing where do you have investments, where do you have your cash, and ultimately what is that financial position, because that's going to be a key thing that banks are going to look at. Another important criteria, I forgot to mention this to talk to folks about, is whether they're an SBA preferred lender or not. SBA preferred lenders are lenders that do a significant enough volume with the SBA and have gone through basically a certification criteria that they're allowed to do their own underwriting in-house. So there are plenty of banks out there who will tell you they can do SBA loans, but because they don't have that certification, they actually have to send the loans off to the SBA to have the SBA sign off and approve on the loan that it meets all of the criteria for that particular loan product. So that takes us to the next step in terms of all right, well, what kind of a business should I actually buy? And The best way that I've really seen and kind of heard this framework get put together is by a gentleman named Sam Masotti. He's created this framework that he calls his Big 3, Little 2. And to share with everybody what that basically is, is the first one is being able to define location of the business. And so this is important to understand because when you're going through business acquisition, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to look at my backyard. Well, again, less than 5% of businesses ever hit $1 million in revenue. And so the odds of you finding one of those in your backyard, especially if you're not in a big, large city metropolitan area, might be really, really small, which means if you're really focused on only searching in your geography, that may extend your timeline. Not only is it potentially going to extend your timeline, but it's also potentially going to impact the type of business that you're going to acquire, which is the second of the big three. You can be really honed in on specific industries, or you can maybe be, a little bit wider on, the types of industries that you're wanting to focus on. And then, you could be completely industry agnostic as well and just say, I'm willing to take any business that comes across that meets my other criteria. Let's talk about number 3, which is how big of a business you're actually going to buy. So as we talked about, businesses can be really, really small. It could literally be like, as I call it, like there's a difference between like wanting to buy a business and buying yourself a job. There are a lot of businesses that are listed for sale that are actually a job, right? They are a single solo operator who is selling their stream of revenue to somebody else who's going to be a single solo operator. That's not necessarily a business. It is, you are getting self-employment, you are getting a degree of autonomy and control over your day and things along those lines. And so again, for the right person, those are fantastic opportunities. And you might be able to buy them in the low 6 figures, potentially even 5-figure range. I've heard of deals getting done for hundreds of dollars, right? So then the little 2, the first one that we're going to be talking about is, how are you going to operate this business? We mentioned that so few businesses ever hit that $1 million in revenue mark, but hopefully you are, looking at businesses that have done that. But that being said, there's still a lot of businesses that are barely doing $1 million. They might be doing 1, 1.2, 1.5. And in a lot of instances, the seller is still a key operator, a key technician in the business. Then the next piece of it is going to be how you're going about getting the financing. So again, you've already thought about this in the previous step. And so this is all about kind of solidifying what that starts to look like. And again, there's a lot of different ways to structure the numbers. I'm not going to get into that again, but just being able to get more clear on how you're going to go about doing it, especially if you're going to be raising any equity from outside investors. There's a lot of different steps that you're going to want to do in terms of outreach and presenting your plans and things along those lines that you're going to want to go through. All right, so step 4 is now going to be how you're going to source your deals. And for the most part, this broadly falls into 2 different buckets. In bucket number 1, you've got brokered searches. So whether these are through business brokers, real estate brokers, investment bankers, there's a whole host of different people and titles and things along those lines. But there are basically people who represent individuals who want to sell their companies. And there are marketplaces like BizBuySell and BizQuest and Website Closers and Flippa and a number of other, websites and resources out there that you can go to and be able to find listings of businesses for sale, whether they are directly for sale by the owners or they are listed by one of these brokers. That is probably the most popular and most common way that people at least get started on their business search. The other broad categorization of ways that you're going to go find a particular deal is through what is generally known as proprietary search. And proprietary search is basically just the idea of you are sourcing your own deal flow. Now, you can do this any number of ways. You can cold call people, you can send direct mail, you can just blast lots of people with email. There's ways to do research and buy industry lists. Then there's just the old school route of showing up at chambers of commerce and knocking on doors or buying the family company from your parents or your siblings or anything along those lines. Again, all of these, there's lots of different nuances to it, but by and large, there's gonna be 2 different buckets of, are you going to go to the brokers or are you going to do proprietary search?
If you're interested in learning more information about our do-it-yourself and done-with-you group coaching programs, or if you're interested in taking your services to the next level with our fully outsourced accounting solutions, getting help with implementing Profit First, or even fractional CFO services, go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description below to find out more about these programs and how we can help support you.
The next thing that you need to do is actually analyze how much is a particular deal worth. So If you're dealing with a broker, they're going to most of the time put a price on a particular listing. Now, just because they put a price on the listing doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the business should be worth for you. As I've alluded to in previous comments, industry plays a big factor in the valuations as well. Things like SaaS companies that can have very quick ramp ups and growth trajectories tend to have very, very high margins. A lot of times, SaaS companies, because, you're like, you got to put in the initial effort to create the code. But once you've done that, like, there's no barrier to ramping up that company, 1,000x in 3 months. Kind of when you're looking at that, you're now looking back to say like, hey, are there any immediate deal killers that I can see, right? So we did our big 3, little 2. We did our exercise of, what kind of a business really makes sense for me. You're looking for the things that you're like, it's not just about like, here's what I do want to do. The more businesses that you're going to look at, you're going to learn what you don't want to do. So now that you've got the business profile, now you're actually going to go ahead and make an offer. Now, typically the way you're going to end up making an offer the vast majority of the time is you're going to write what's called a letter of intent, or an LOI. It basically gives the overall outline and structure of, the deal terms that you're proposing. Another piece of things that, I learned through my first acquisition. So in my first acquisition, I went through was I did not have non-solicitation agreements with the employees, and I did not have any recourse with the seller when I bought the business for any insufficiencies that ultimately arose out of the business. And the last piece, and this is the hardest part, the absolute hardest part of the making an offer and the negotiating process, is don't be afraid to walk away from the deal. This is where you start getting really emotionally invested. You've had conversations with the seller. You spent time crafting this LOI. You start thinking about what it's going to be like to go in the business. You've gotten really excited about having found this, especially if you not only submit your LOI, but like if the seller accepts it, and you get into the next stage that we're just about to talk about, which is going to be due diligence. It's very important that you be willing to kill the deal if there is a problem. The list of things you're going to want to do diligence are their financials. You're going to want to look at their contracts. You're going to want to, review their employees. Odds are you're not going to be allowed to talk to any of their clients. You're probably not going to be able to talk to any of the employees. How long have they been there? What's their background? What's their skill set? For me, it's like, do they have a CPA? Do they have an EA? What's their training and their background and all of that? You want to make sure you understand their legal structure, who the owners are. Again, are you doing an asset sale versus a stock sale? Those are important things to identify. What are the insurances that you need? Do they have enough insurance? Do they not have enough insurance? Is there bonding? Is there licensing? You need to look at their inventory if they have inventory. Again, what's the condition of their equipment? Whether that's, vehicles or production equipment or whatever it is, you want to make sure you understand how old is it, what's its life cycle. Then you also need to do diligence the real estate, right? So whether you're buying the real estate or inheriting the real estate or leasing the real estate, does the seller own the real estate and leasing it back to you? There's all kinds of scenarios where you want to be able to understand, just the risks and the impact of the real estate on the deal, how that's going to impact things, because it absolutely can. Now that you've kind of that's a lot of the stuff that you're going to do. It's not an exhaustive list. Let's assume you get through all your due diligence, you've gotten everything to the bank, you get your clear to close, or you get your commitment letter. Your commitment letter is when the bank's now going to officially kind of kick off doing the last of their due diligence to get you clear to close. So they're going to start pulling some legal things. You're going to be working with your attorney to draft your asset purchase agreement or your APA. Now you've kind of repivoted from the hey, I'm trying to find all the skeletons in the closet with the seller, to hey, let's start talking about the transition, right? And then operating is it's a whole different kind of animal. So you do all this stuff, this whole world of business acquisition, then you get into operating, and it's a whole different beast. It's a whole different animal that is infinitely more challenging than you ever think it's going to be, but it's also going to be one of the most rewarding things that you possibly can do if you followed and you started with step 1 and step 2, and you really did that soul searching to make sure you were buying the right business for you. And so with that, I want you to go ahead and click on this next video right here on your screen, where we're going to actually go diving deep into how you do go through that process of figuring out what the right business for you to buy would be. So go ahead and click it, and I look forward to seeing you there.